All right, hey folks, today we are talking about Henneman's size principle and how that relates to what rep ranges you choose to utilize for your hypertrophy efforts. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me, there is a link in the description. So let's crack on. Now, I've mentioned previously that the current body of research says the ideal rep range for hypertrophy is between 5 to 30 reps. And that's quite a wide range. So today I want to help you narrow that range down by discussing a little bit about Henneman's size principle and how that relates to your muscle fiber recruitment. Now, this is something we've known for decades, but it was jogged in my memory recently because of a account on Instagram I follow called Physique from a guy called Eugene Loki. So I'm going to show you some of his slides here today, and hopefully that will be interesting. So he goes on to talk about what order the body uses to recruit motor units and muscle fibers, right, when it's trying to lift a heavy weight or trying to lift any weight. So for light weights, the body recruits only a smaller amount of muscle fibers. So for movements that I'm doing, like hand gestures that I'm using now, the body is generally not going to recruit like all the muscle fibers unless I specifically tense hard and make it, okay? Now, when you're lifting a heavy weight, your body tends to throw at the weight more muscle fibers. So more muscle fibers are turned on immediately because they sense that it's a heavy weight. Now, the analogy that Eugene gave, which was very clever, was people pushing a car, okay? So the people pushing a car are the motor units which are recruited, and the car is the weight you're trying to lift. So it's a good analogy. So this is how it goes. So when you're lifting a light weight, the weight's light, our central nervous system can detect that. So they only activate a handful, a smaller amount of muscle fibers to lift the weight. So anything I'm doing now, hand gestures I'm making, my neck is moving, all that kind of, my eyes are moving, that doesn't take all the muscle fibers in those muscles to make those things happen, just a few. So that's something you can keep up for a long time. I can do hand gestures all day. Sometimes I do. Now, when you're lifting heavy weights, and particularly the heaviest weights, your body turns on all the muscle fibers at once at the top end range. Now, that's one advantage for actually lifting relatively heavy in the gym, because you know that all muscle fibers are going to at least get stimulated. And then if you take that weight to failure, well, odds are they'll be stimulated enough. So there is an advantage there for heavy weights. Now, if we look at the next slide, light weights to failure. With light weights to failure, your body will only look at recruiting additional muscle fibers as the first ones get fatigued. So as you go further into the set, your body then recruits more and more muscle fibers to help with the load. Now, therein is, well, that's a positive thing, but also therein lies the negative against going too high in your rep ranges, because it's hard. Like when you're training in the, say, up to 8 range, okay, relatively heavy weights, you lift, take it to failure, boom. You're pretty good. You're gonna get a good growth stimulus because most of those reps had most of your muscle fibers activated. The problem with lifting light weights to failure is lifting to failure on higher reps is actually really painful, and it's probably harder than lifting to failure on heavy weight for lower reps, just in terms of the pain you have to go through. Think about the pain it might take you to actually reach failure on a 30 rep set. You're really digging deep into the weeds there to try and get that failure point, which you need to progress on lighter weights. Now, if you're lifting the 8 to 12 range, you don't actually need to go to failure. Now, if you've seen my video on failure, you'll know that, well, it's probably a good idea. You can take it while it's there. But even then, it's probably easier to do so, because once you've got, say, rep 7, and the next rep you're going to be failing, great, you can go ahead, you can lift it, you can fail. If you're on rep like 28, 29 or whatever, and you're still able to get a few more, those mini micro reps, that step towards failure, they're all very close to failure. They're all at that stage, very, very painful. The lactic acid is building up. The reps are really, really close to failure, and they're just very, very painful. So While I think there, scientifically speaking, we can say that yes, we get equal hypertrophy from 5 to 30 as long as we go to failure on the higher rep range. Just beware that training that high is generally very, very painful. So for me, in my own training, I tend to stick to 6 to 15 as a reasonable range, because I think any higher than that, and you're really delving into some quite painful territories where just practically and emotionally speaking, you might not be able to go there on every set that you need to. So I try and keep the reps a little bit lower than 30, certainly lower than 20, in that 15 to 6 range. And of course, any lower than 6, probably not really ideal for hypertrophy. So it leaves us with a bit more of a precise zone than 5 to 30. I'm quite a big fan of about 6 to 15 as a still a relatively broad range, but enough that we think, okay, we're getting a decent blend of strength work and a decent blend of high rep work without getting into those really uber painful territories of 30 rep work, which I don't really think it offers anything to the table. It's all about fiber muscle recruitment and tension on the muscle. So, as a summary, the Henneman size principle says that the heavier the weight, the more muscle fibers will be activated from the start of the set. Okay, the lighter the weight, the less muscle fibers will be activated at the beginning of the set and will be brought in as the muscle gets fatigued. So, to activate all of your muscle fibers when the weight is light means you've got to really take it right the way to failure, so your body recruits all the muscle fibers to make it an effective set. So I would personally recommend sticking to the lower end, and my personal recommendations are between 6 to 15. And if we narrow that down even further, well, we get to the 8 to 12 classic rep range, which people were talking about 6 decades ago. All right, folks, I'm going to call it there. Hopefully that was useful, and I'll speak to you guys